This aircraft didn't have a propeller on the nose, and it wasn't a rear-mounted pusher either. Its propellers sat in the middle. This was a real wartime proposal from Daimler-Benz, a heavy fighter built around a monstrous 16-cylinder engine, driving a pair of contra-rotating propellers spinning just behind the cockpit. Like the Me-262, it was a design that promised the impossible. Massive cannons, armor-busting attacks from above, and even the brutal side effect of turning bailout attempts into a deadly gamble. On paper, the DB Jaeger was terrifying, but in 1942, promises weren't enough. Germany needed a miracle fighter, something with overwhelming power to stop the Allied and Soviet advance. The problem wasn't pilot skill, it was engines. The DB601 and 605 were reaching their limits. With no room left to grow, Daimler-Benz did what engine designers always do when asked for more power. They added cylinders. The result was the DB609. The idea was simple. Take the DB603, stretch it into a 60-degree V16, and push beyond 2,600 horsepower. In theory, it offered nearly double the power of contemporary Allied fighters. In reality, it became a 62-liter engine almost 3 meters long, weighing around 1.4 tons, with a crankshaft so long it behaved like a skipping rope at high RPM. With the engine defined, the next challenge was clear: designing an aircraft that could actually survive flying with it. And you might be thinking, who could possibly pilot something like this? What if you could test your skills under pressure, without ever leaving your couch? That's where Wings of Heroes comes in. It's an accessible but realistic dogfighting simulator featuring intense 5v5 battles, teamwork, formation flying, and squad-based tactics, and that's what I'm proposing. This aircraft didn't have a propeller on the nose, and it wasn't a rear-mounted pusher either. Its propellers sat in the middle. This was a real wartime proposal from Daimler-Benz, a heavy fighter built around a massive 16-cylinder engine, driving a pair of contra-rotating propellers spinning just behind the cockpit. Like the Me-262, it was a design that promised the impossible. Heavy cannons, top-down armor attacks, and a layout so brutal it made bailing out deadly. On paper, the DB Jaeger was terrifying, but in 1942, Germany needed more than promises. By mid-war, the Reich was losing air superiority. Allied fighters were faster, tougher, and better armed, while German aircraft struggled to keep up. The issue wasn't pilot skill, it was engine power. The DB601 and 605 had reached their limits. So Daimler-Benz did what engineers always do when asked for more power: they added cylinders. The result was the DB609. The idea was straightforward. Take the DB603, stretch it into a 60-degree V16, and push past 2,600 horsepower. In theory, that meant nearly double the power of Allied fighters. In reality, it created a 62-liter engine almost 3 meters long, weighing around 1.4 tons, with a crankshaft so long it behaved like a skipping rope at 2,800 RPM. With the engine defined, the real challenge began: designing an airframe that could survive it. And you might be thinking, who could actually fly something like this? What if you could test your skills in high-pressure air combat without leaving your couch? That's where Wings of Heroes comes in. It's an easy-to-pick-up but realistic dogfighting simulator featuring intense 5v5 battles, formation flying, and squad-based teamwork that I'm decent as a solo player. But as a channel, we could climb the rankings together. My player name is Found Explained. Add me, and let's fly. As you improve, you unlock new aircraft, customized engines, armor, and weapons, and dominate the skies. What I really love is Wings of Heroes' commitment to World War II authenticity. Real aircraft, historically inspired battles, and new maps, missions, and planes added every month. That if you want to play with me, download the game using the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. Don't forget to use my promo code FOUND to get your first plane skin. Normally, Daimler-Benz just supplied engines and let aircraft manufacturers figure out the rest. But with the DB609, they designed the entire aircraft themselves. The result is what we now call the Daimler-Benz Jaeger or Hunter, though that was never its official name. Ignore the mid-mounted propellers for a moment, and the layout is surprisingly conventional. A large annular radiator in the nose, the DB609 mounted directly behind it, a long straight low wing near the cockpit, and a standard single fin and tailplane at the back. It would also have used a tricycle landing gear, because whatever this aircraft was, it clearly wasn't going to sit comfortably on its tail. Armament would likely have followed the Me-262's path, with multiple autocannons, while still being adaptable for rockets or bombs, making it a capable multi-role platform. Then there's the cockpit. The pilot sat far aft beneath a teardrop canopy, with a spectacular and slightly unsettling view straight toward the massive contra-rotating propellers behind them. From the side, it looked like an FW-190 and AP-39 Airacobra tried to occupy the same parking space, and no one had the heart to separate them. Interestingly, the design began as two separate concepts, one with a tractor propeller and another with a pusher at the tail. Eventually, someone asked the obvious question, why not meet in the middle and put the propeller right there? So why take an already complex 16-cylinder engine, bolt on a long drive shaft, run it beneath the cockpit, and mount a giant spinning disc just behind the pilot's head? Because, at least in theory, it offered some real advantages. First, clean airflow over the wings. With no propeller at the nose, the wings would see largely undisturbed air, improving lift and drag characteristics and allowing smoother airflow over the wing roots and leading edges. Second, improved tail control in the prop wash. By placing the propeller disc ahead of the tailplane, the elevators and rudder would sit directly in high-speed airflow, providing stronger control at low speeds. All of this should have provided extremely strong pitch and yaw control on final approach and during tight, low-speed turns. Almost like crude thrust vectoring, something you simply don't get with a traditional pusher prop. Then there's advantage number 3. Contra-rotating propellers without gun headaches. With twin propellers on the nose, you either lose the centerline cannon or you design a synchronization system that allows shells to pass through two spinning sets of blades. An engineering nightmare. Moving the propellers to the middle leaves a clean engine hub at the front, perfect for a large 20 or even 30 millimeters cannon, plus additional machine guns in the upper nose, all without the risk of shredding your own propellers. The use of contra-rotating props also canceled out engine torque, something we've already seen attempted in a few other designs done on paper. The mid-mounted propeller layout looks like the best of all worlds, offering advantages over both tractor and pusher configurations. But every one of those benefits came with a massive asterisk. The aircraft would have been a mechanical nightmare to maintain in wartime conditions. Noise and vibration in the cockpit would have been severe, making long missions miserable. Landings would also be risky. One mistake and you'd lose the propellers, along with an already overcomplicated airframe. And then there was the biggest issue of all, escape. In an era before ejection seats, pilots bailed out by opening the canopy and jumping. In the case of the Hunter, that would have meant leaping straight into a spinning meat grinder. There was simply no safe way out. Even if you ignore the rather obvious pilot survival problem, the entire concept still hinged on one thing: the DB609 engine actually working. And spoiler alert, it didn't. That enormous crankshaft suffered from severe torsional vibration, and with that, the whole design quietly collapsed on the drawing board. At high power, the engine wanted to resonate, twist, and tear itself apart. Daimler-Benz experimented with roller bearings, revised crank throws, and various damping solutions, but the power-to-weight ratio still couldn't compete with simply pushing the existing DB603 further. And while all of this was happening, jet engines were arriving. By 1943, the Jumo 004 was already running on test stands, and it was becoming obvious that piston monsters like the DB609 and the even larger 24-cylinder DB604 were technological dead ends. They might have made sense for large bombers, but Germany lacked the fuel, materials, and, most importantly, the time that in April and May of 1943, the Reich Air Ministry canceled the DB609 program, along with its related variants, the DB619 and DB629, that with no engine, the Daimler-Benz Jaeger instantly lost all funding. A partial fuselage mock-up reportedly existed, reaching only as far as where the propellers would have been mounted. That was as far as the aircraft ever progressed. That Daimler-Benz wasn't the only company interested in the engine, though. Focke-Wulf explored a more conservative approach, the FW190 DB609. The idea was simple: remove the BMW 801 radial, stretch the nose dramatically to fit the V-16, and then try to pull the center of gravity back by relocating supercharger radiators to the fuselage sides behind the cockpit, the so-called hamster cheeks. Even this sensible application ran into serious issues. The aircraft became dangerously nose-heavy, landing gear loads increased beyond limits, and the engine's vibration problems remained unresolved. When the DB609 was cancelled, this FW-190 variant disappeared with it. And then there was Blohm and Voss. Their P.192 projects explored dive bomber and ground attack concepts with the engine buried in the mid-fuselage, a propeller literally slicing the aircraft in half, supported by small forward planes to brace the structure. Once again, the goal was the same: clean airflow over the wings, strong tail authority in the prop wash, and a heavy battery of nose-mounted guns. But in reality, the design ran straight into hard limits: mechanics, materials, and production capacity. Every kilogram spent on clever transmissions and gearboxes was a kilogram not spent on fuel, armor, or simply building 100 more conventional fighters. And it's worth remembering that Germany wasn't alone in chasing strange engineering solutions. We've already covered the Martin Model 262 on this channel, America's early 1950s attempt at a turboprop VTOL convoy defender. It was essentially a fighter-helicopter hybrid designed to launch vertically from tiny ship platforms. Like the Daimler-Benz Jaeger, it combined contra-rotating propellers, unconventional aerodynamics, and extreme mechanical complexity in the hope of unlocking a new performance envelope. The Martin 262 never made it past the proposal stage. The U.S. Navy eventually favored more conventional tail-sitters like the Convair Pogo, which also failed spectacularly, but these projects make a broader point. In this era, engineers everywhere were sketching bold, borderline absurd concepts, trying to squeeze out just a little more performance, even when the technology simply wasn't ready to support it. Let's imagine, purely as a thought experiment, that Daimler-Benz had solved the crankshaft vibration issues, refined the gearbox, and delivered the DB609 in time. On paper, the result would have been brutally fast in a straight line, with a frightening climb rate. Think late-war Spitfire or Do-335 territory. The cost, however, would have been complexity, weight, and survivability. And by the late 1940s, jet fighters would have cruised comfortably past it anyway. The Daimler-Benz DB609 Jaeger sits in that strange category of World War II projects. Just plausible enough to produce drawings and mock-ups, but never quite sensible once you step back and look at the whole picture. And somewhere, in an alternate Wolfenstein-style universe, there's a very nervous test pilot glancing over his shoulder at those spinning contra-rotating propellers, thinking, "I'm definitely not bailing out of this one." Don't forget to download Wings of Heroes and fly with me. Use the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen.